There is a moment in every quarterback competition where the noise stops and the football just speaks for itself. Day 11 of Brown's training camp gave everybody watching one of those moments, and if you blinked, you might have convinced yourself it was nothing. But it was not nothing. Shedeur Sanders had been pulled back from first-team reps for 2 straight days while Deshaun Watson ran with the ones. And when those reps finally came back around, Sanders stepped into that huddle and immediately made everyone in that building remember exactly why this competition was never truly out of his hands to begin with. Rolling left, throwing right, finding the corner of the end zone with the kind of precision that does not happen by accident. That is timing. That is trust in the route. That is a quarterback operating at a level that goes way beyond what most people expected to see this early in August. And what unfolded across the rest of that practice session had layers to it that the surface-level reporting is completely missing. The full story of what happened out there, what it means for this competition, and what is quietly being overlooked in the coverage of this battle is exactly what we are getting into today. Right here on Gridiron ground, where we do not skim the surface. We go all the way in. Drop one word in the comments right now. Just one word that describes how you feel about Shedeur Sanders at this exact moment in camp. One word. Let it fly. Before moving further, we're pushing for 1,000 subscribers here at Gridiron Ground. If you're enjoying our Browns and Shedeur Sanders coverage, hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. Let's build this community together. Before anything else gets discussed, the framework matters. Because without understanding the structure that the Browns coaching staff has built around this quarterback competition, everything that happened on day 11 loses a significant amount of its context. And context is exactly what separates a real analysis from a highlight reel recap. So let us start there. Head coach Kevin Stefanski had already laid out the broader picture for how this rotation was going to function as the team moves toward preseason games. The plan, as communicated publicly, is that each quarterback, Sanders and Watson both, will get a start in one of the first 2 preseason games. That is the baseline. That is what the staff committed to giving both competitors as a minimum evaluation window before any larger decisions start getting made. On the surface, that sounds completely fair. 2 quarterbacks, 2 games. Equal opportunity to show what they can do against real competition with real stakes attached to it. But here is where it gets more complicated than that simple summary suggests. Joint practices against the Buffalo Bills are sitting on the schedule, and those sessions are actively changing how the rep distribution gets calculated going forward. Joint practices against another NFL team are not the same as internal scrimmages. The competition level is genuinely different. The film generated from those sessions carries different weight. And when the coaching staff has to figure out how those joint practice reps factor into what each quarterback has already earned or still needs to prove, the math on the rotation stops being clean and starts getting murky fast. Stefanski said publicly that after both quarterbacks get their preseason starts logged, the coaching staff expects a clearer picture to emerge from everything they have seen across camp and preseason combined, which sounds reasonable on paper. But what that statement is also quietly doing is leaving an enormous amount of discretion in the hands of the people running this evaluation. A clearer picture emerging is not the same as a predetermined criteria being met. It means the staff retains the flexibility to weigh factors that never get fully disclosed to the public. And in a competition this closely watched, that kind of flexibility cuts both ways depending on which quarterback the decision ultimately favors. This is the environment Sanders walked back into on day 11. Not a neutral open competition with a clean scoreboard. A structured evaluation with moving parts, a preseason timeline tightening up fast, joint practices complicating the rep count, and a coaching staff that has been deliberately careful about how much they commit to in public statements. That is a lot of pressure sitting on every single rep before a single preseason snap has even been.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Taken. Now here is something worth sitting with before moving forward. The fact that Sanders came back into that environment after 2 straight days away from the ones and immediately had a genuinely strong practice session is not a small thing. It would have been completely understandable for a young quarterback to come back in with something to prove and press too hard, force throws, try to do too much. That is what anxiety looks like on a football field. What Sanders showed instead was the opposite of that. And that tells you something real about where his head is in this competition right now. Right here is actually a perfect moment to mention something. If you are watching this on Gridiron ground and you have not subscribed yet, right now is the time. Because we are breaking down every single layer of this quarterback battle as it develops in real time, and you do not want to be catching up on this story after the fact. Hit that subscribe button and stay locked in with us. The foundation of day 11 starts with understanding that foundation. Now let us get into what Sanders actually did when those reps came back to him. 2 straight days. That is how long Deshaun Watson had been running exclusively with the first-team offense before Sanders got those reps handed back to him on day 11. And it is worth being precise about what those 2 days actually included, because the details matter more than the headline number. One of those sessions was an indoor practice without pads, and that specific detail deserves more attention than it has been getting in the broader coverage of this camp. Indoor sessions without pads are not random scheduling choices. They represent a particular kind of controlled environment, less physical chaos, more focus on mental processing and timing, less opportunity for things to go sideways due to contact or live physicality. They are, by almost every account from people who have been around NFL training camps at a professional level, the kind of setting where veteran quarterbacks with polished mechanics and deep system knowledge tend to perform at their very best. The game slows down in that environment for someone like Watson specifically because he is not managing any of the physical variables. He is just executing. So Watson got 2 days in the most favorable possible conditions for his skill set, running with the ones while Sanders worked with the second unit. And when those reps finally rotated back to Sanders, the question everybody watching wanted answered was simple. Would he come out tight? Would the break-in rhythm show up in his processing speed or his confidence throwing into tight windows? Would the 2-day stretch away from the starting offense create any visible rust? The answer was a clean and decisive no on all of those counts. Sanders came out, and by every credible account from reporters and analysts who were actually at that practice, had what most people watching would call a genuinely great day. The word that kept coming up across multiple independent reports was decisive. He was decisive early in the session before any rhythm had been established. He was decisive often, not just on the easy reps, but on the throws that required real commitment before the window was fully open. And the tape that has come out of this session backs that assessment up rather than contradicting it. The throw to Isaiah Bond is the one that demands the most attention because of what it actually represents beyond just a completed pass. This was not a timing route in the simple sense where the quarterback and receiver are just counting the same number of steps and the ball arrives at the expected moment. This was an anticipation throw, and there is a meaningful difference between those 2 things. An anticipation throw means Sanders was...
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Already committed to releasing that football before Bond had fully come out of his break. The decision was made earlier in the process than a react and respond quarterback would make it. Sanders was trusting that Bond was going to be exactly where the route design put him, and he was delivering the ball into that space before the window was even fully visible to someone watching from the outside. That requires a quarterback to have the route completely internalized, to trust the receiver completely, and to have enough confidence in his own processing to commit early rather than waiting for certainty. This is precisely the kind of throw that gets questioned early in a young quarterback's career. The narrative that follows most rookie passers, especially one coming out of a system as unique as the one Sanders ran in college, is that they can make the easy throws look easy, but that they will hesitate or misfire on the throws that require anticipation and trust rather than reaction. That narrative has been following Sanders into this camp from the moment he showed up. And he is answering it rep by rep, not as an occasional flash of something special, but as a repeated pattern across multiple sessions. The Isaiah Bond throw on day 11 was not a one-off. It was another data point in a growing body of evidence that the anticipation and processing ability is genuinely there, not manufactured for the highlight reel, but actually present in his game right now. What happened next in that practice session went even deeper into the specifics of what Sanders is doing well. And one particular rep involving a pre-snap adjustment became the center of a conversation that even his critics could not dismiss. Here is something that does not show up in a box score or a simple completion percentage tracker. Pre-snap processing. The ability to look at a defense before the ball is even snapped, identify something that changes the math on the play, and communicate an adjustment to the entire offense in real time without disrupting the rhythm of the operation. That is one of the most demanding cognitive tasks a quarterback performs on any given rep, and it is one of the hardest things to evaluate from the outside, because it happens so fast that casual observers often do not even realize it occurred. On day 11, there was a rep where Sanders walked up to the line of scrimmage, read what the defense was giving him, and changed the play entirely before the snap. Not a simple hot route adjustment to one receiver, a full change into a different route concept based on what the defensive alignment was showing. And then, after making that adjustment at the line, he delivered an accurate football just out of the defender's reach on the adjusted route. The whole sequence, the identification, the communication, the execution, happened cleanly and without hesitation. Now here is the part of this particular story that carries the most weight. One of the voices on 92.3 The Fan, a respected analyst who has been at these practices and who has been openly and specifically critical of Sanders at various points across this camp, singled out that exact rep. This is not someone who came into day 11 looking for reasons to compliment the rookie. This is someone who had publicly raised legitimate concerns about Sanders at other points, and whose opinion on a good day from Sanders carries more credibility precisely because of that established critical lens. That analyst pointed out specifically that Sanders processed the offense extremely well on that rep, noted the pre-snap adjustment, noted the accurate ball that followed the adjustment, and framed it as a genuinely impressive piece of quarterbacking rather than just a nice play. When a skeptic says something like that, it means something different than when a supporter says the same thing. Supporters are expected to find the good. Skeptics are expected to find the problems. When a skeptic acknowledges the good, the acknowledgement carries real weight because it is not what they were looking for. It is what they found despite looking for something else. That same analyst, to their credit, also raised a concern that is completely fair and worth including here, because the full picture matters more than the flattering one. The concern was straightforward. A lot of the strong reps from Sanders this camp have come in lighter, no-contact settings. The desire was to see more of those sharp processing moments, more of those anticipation throws and pre-snap adjustments, happen consistently when the pads are on and the physicality of the session is elevated. That is not a small concern, and it should not be dismissed. There is a real difference between operating at a high level in a controlled environment and operating at that same level when the physical chaos of full contact is added to the equation. Defensive linemen getting into the quarterback's face changes timing. Physical contact at the line of scrimmage changes route execution. The whole game speeds up and gets louder in a way that no indoor no-pad session can fully replicate. Seeing Sanders translate what he has been doing in the lighter sessions into the pads-on environment is the legitimate next evaluation checkpoint. Wednesday was the session everybody had circled because of exactly that. Sanders was expected to get his next extended run with the ones in full pads, and that session represented a genuine step up in the stakes of this evaluation. Winning the day in shorts is good. Winning the day in full pads is the thing that actually moves the needle on how serious people have to take this competition heading into preseason. Here is something else worth noting that connects to a broader point about how this camp has been covered. The outside voice who praised Sanders on day 11 was one of several credible observers whose assessments of this competition have been more nuanced than the loudest takes circulating online. The social media version of this competition often looks like a binary war between Sanders supporters and Watson defenders. The reality on the ground at these practices has been more complicated and more interesting than that framing allows for. And speaking of things that are more interesting than the simple
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Framing. What Sanders did on the Casey Conception rep is the kind of detail that gets completely lost in a tracker or a completion percentage. But it is exactly the kind of thing that separates a quarterback who is playing well from a quarterback who is actually thinking at a high level. This is where Gridiron Ground does what we do. We do not stop at the number. We go find out what the number actually means. If you are not subscribed yet, that right there is the reason to hit the button. Because this level of detail is what every episode brings to the table. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and do not miss a single breakdown. There is a phrase that gets used a lot in quarterback evaluation circles that sounds simple, but actually contains a significant amount of football intelligence inside it. Ball placement. Every fan understands on some level that a completed pass is good and an incomplete pass is bad. But the conversation about where the ball is placed relative to where the receiver is, and where the defender is, and where the open field is, that conversation happens at a level of detail that most casual viewing does not reach. The Casey Conception rep from day 11 is a perfect entry point into that conversation because it illustrates ball placement in a way that is genuinely teachable. Here is what happened on the play. Conception ran a route that put a defender on the ground, not through contact, but through the route itself, the kind of clean separation that happens when a receiver executes a route with enough precision and explosion that the defender simply cannot stay with him and ends up losing the battle for leverage at the top of the route. That is a receiver doing his job at a high level and creating a window for his quarterback. Now at that moment, Sanders had a choice that most people watching would not even register as a choice. The obvious throw, the comfortable throw, the throw that most quarterbacks at any level would reflexively make, is toward the sideline. Conception had separation. The sideline throw gets the ball out of the danger zone and away from any help defenders who might be closing. It is safe. It is clean. It gets the completion. But Sanders did not make that throw. Instead, he placed the ball underneath, letting Conception work back toward the football, giving his receiver the chance to turn his body and get vertical with real open field in front of him after the catch. The difference between those two decisions is significant. The sideline throw gets the yards that the route already created. The underneath placement gives Conception a chance to create more yards after the catch by turning up field into space rather than being immediately pushed out of bounds by the sideline. That is a quarterback thinking one step ahead of the completion. Not just asking how do I get this ball caught, but asking what happens after it gets caught, and how does my decision right now affect that outcome. That is a layer of processing that goes well beyond what you typically see from a quarterback who has not yet played a single regular season NFL snap. And it is not something that gets captured in a tracker that says completed pass, yards gained. It shows up only when you actually watch the rep and understand what the decision tree looked like before the ball left Sanders' hand. This kind of detail matters for a specific reason that goes beyond just appreciating a well-thrown football. When you see a young quarterback making these kinds of subtle, sophisticated decisions consistently, not just on one rep, but as a recurring pattern across multiple sessions, it tells you something about the ceiling. It tells you the processing is already operating at a level that goes beyond what the age or the experience level would suggest is typical. And it raises a real question about what that processing looks like a year from now, 2 years from now, when the physical reps and the system familiarity compound on top of what is already there. Sanders is doing something on these reps that his critics have been reluctant to fully credit. He is not just avoiding mistakes. He is actively making decisions that require anticipation, trust, and spatial awareness all working together in real time. The conception rep is one example. The bond anticipation throw is another. The pre-snap adjustment to the different route concept is a third. These are not coincidences, and they are not manufactured for the benefit of the people watching. They are a pattern. But here is the thing about patterns. They get tested. And day 11 had a stretch of practice that did exactly that to both quarterbacks and both units. What happened in that stretch is where the coverage has been the most incomplete, and where the real story is the most different from the version that has been circulating online. Let us be completely straightforward about what happened during the 2-minute drill period on day 11, because the way this particular stretch has been covered in some corners of the internet does not match the full reality of what went down on that practice field. The setup was the first team offense going against the first team defense. That is the highest stakes internal evaluation environment available in a training camp setting. Ones versus ones in a 2-minute drill with the clock running is as close to real game pressure as you can manufacture in August without actually playing a preseason game. So what happened in that environment matters, and how it happened matters just as much. Sanders had a short completion to Judy to open the drive. Nothing spectacular, but a clean execution, ball out on time, positive yardage gain.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Then the offense hit 3 straight pre-snap penalties in a row. 3 consecutive penalties before the ball was even snapped. The last one in that sequence was a false start from Spencer Fano, and that name requires some context before the penalty gets assigned a meaning. Spencer Fano was getting his first real run with the starting offensive line on day 11. First real run. Not his 5th or his 10th, his first. He is a young player being asked to step into a starting role with an offensive line that has been reshuffled significantly, and he is doing it against a defensive front that is not making his life easy. A false start from a player in that specific situation is not a character indictment, and it is not a systemic failure of the quarterback running the operation. It is what a new starter looks like when the competition across the line from him is at an elite level. Now here is where the story takes a turn that the surface-level coverage has almost entirely missed. After Sanders' unit had those pre-snap issues in the 2-minute drill, Watson's unit came onto the field, and Watson's group had 2 consecutive pre-snap penalties of their own, back-to-back. The last one in that sequence was also a false start, and that false start was actually how the entire practice ended. The coaching staff shut the session down after that stretch of penalties across both units. Read that again. Both units, both quarterbacks, both groups of offensive linemen, all of them had pre-snap issues in that same stretch of practice. The problem was not isolated to one quarterback's operation. It was not a Sanders issue or a Watson issue. It was an offensive line communication issue happening across the entire first and second unit on the same day under the same practice conditions. And yet the coverage distribution on those penalties has not been remotely equal. There have been instances across this camp where pre-snap issues involving Watson's group have generated significantly less social media attention and significantly less analytical focus than similar issues on Sanders' side of the operation. The film of those Watson unit penalties exists. People who were at practice saw them happen. But the traction they generated online was not proportional to what similarly situated Sanders unit penalties generated in comparable situations. Now, to be absolutely fair here, and fairness requires saying this clearly, there is not some coordinated effort to protect Watson at Sanders' expense in the coverage of this camp. That kind of grand conspiracy framing is not supported by the evidence, and it is not a useful way to think about what is actually happening. What is happening is something more mundane and more familiar to anyone who has watched how narratives form around NFL stories. The more famous player generates more interest in both his good plays and his bad plays. Watson's history and his contract and the stakes attached to his situation make him a bigger story than a rookie in almost any normal circumstance. And bigger stories generate unequal coverage in both directions. But here is what that coverage pattern does damage to: the fair evaluation of a competition that is supposed to be operating on merit. When penalties that happen to both units get talked about as though they primarily belong to one quarterback's ledger, the picture that emerges for the audience is distorted from the actual reality on the field. And that distortion has consequences for how the public understands what is actually being decided in this competition. There is also a broader football reality worth stating plainly. You have a rookie left tackle going up against one of the genuinely elite edge rushers in this league every single day in practice. That is a mismatch that creates operational chaos regardless of what the quarterback behind that tackle is calling or checking out of. False starts happen in that situation because the physical pressure is real, and the communication load is high, and everything is moving faster than it will be in a regular season game, where the rhythm has been established over months of work together. What happened next in that practice, specifically in the touchdown column, generated its own separate controversy that the public tracker numbers cannot begin to capture. The Denzel Boston play in the corner of the end zone is the one that has generated the most debate coming out of day 11, and for genuinely good reason. Not manufactured debate, not social media noise for the sake of noise, but actual football disagreement between people who watched the same replay and came away with completely different reads on what they saw. Here is what happened on the play. Sanders put the ball in the corner of the end zone to Boston, who went up and made the catch in a tight window. The debate that followed immediately was about whether Boston had both feet inbounds when he secured the possession. Some people watching the replay saw a clean touchdown. Others watched the exact same footage and argued convincingly that at least one foot was out of bounds before the catch was fully completed. This is genuinely worth your own eyes on the replay, not because one side is obviously right and the other is obviously wrong, but because the angle matters and the exact moment you freeze the frame matters, and reasonable people can come away from that footage with different conclusions. What do you think when you watch it? Drop it in the comments. In bounds or out of bounds? It is a real question with a real disagreement attached to it, and your read is worth hearing. But here is why the Boston play matters beyond just the touchdown or no touchdown debate. It connects directly to a broader issue with how this quarterback competition is being tracked and reported publicly, which is that the public trackers circulating during this camp are missing context at a level that makes them genuinely unreliable as a primary source of evaluation. The public tracker is a tool that many fans have been using to follow the competition day by day. It gives completion percentages, touchdown numbers, turnover counts, and a general sense of how each quarterback performed on a given day. And for what it is a fun and accessible way to follow along with a competition that is not televised in full. The problem is what gets left out. Scoring plays have been left off of tracker tallies during this camp without explanation. Plays that observers at practice reported as touchdowns did not show up in subsequent tracker summaries. Whether that reflects honest errors in tracking, differences in how plays were officiated informally during the session, or simply incomplete information being reported, the result is the same. The number on the tracker does not always match the full reality of what happened on the field. The Boston play is a specific example of a rep where the scoring status is genuinely disputed, and where the tracker has to make a call that may or may not match the consensus of the people who were physically present. When that kind of gap between the tracked number and the observed reality exists, using the tracker as the primary lens for evaluating who is winning and who is losing the competition becomes a problem. This is not an argument for ignoring the tracker entirely. It is an argument for engaging with it critically and checking it against other reporting rather than treating it as the definitive record of what happened. The tracker is a starting point for conversation. It is not a final verdict. Now, amid all the controversy and the tracking debates, there is a development worth acknowledging that has been genuinely positive, and that deserves credit even for someone who has been willing to be critical when criticism was warranted. The connection developing between Sanders and Jerry Jeudy has been better than expected. Jeudy came into this camp with question marks around his ability to get on the same page quickly with a new quarterback, particularly a rookie quarterback still establishing his timing with every receiver on the roster. Those question marks were not unfair, but what has actually shown up across multiple practice sessions, including day 11, is a chemistry between those two that is developing in a real direction. Not fully formed yet, not the kind of automatic connection that takes a full season to build, but genuinely moving forward in a positive way. At the same time, Denzel Boston has been the standout story of this camp at the receiver position. He has established himself through consistent performance as the clear number one option in this offense right now, and that assessment is based on what has shown up on the field rather than reputation or draft pedigree. Boston has earned that standing. And the fact that Sanders has been connecting with him efficiently in the red zone, the Boston end zone play being one example, whatever its official status ends up being, is a significant piece of the larger puzzle about how this offense can function with Sanders at the controls. The actual numbers from the day put everything in a frame that is both simple and more complicated than it looks at first glance. Let us put the completion percentages on the table, because they are worth discussing even with all the caveats about tracker reliability that were just laid out. Sanders finished day 11 at approximately 70% on his throws. Watson finished at approximately 68% on his. Those numbers are close enough that they do not tell a dramatically different story about accuracy or efficiency between the two quarterbacks on this specific day. And that matters for a reason that cuts in an unexpected direction. When the completion percentages are this close between two quarterbacks competing for the same job, and when both units experienced similar pre-snap penalty issues across the same practice session, the separation between the two competitors has to come from somewhere else. And on day 11, that somewhere else was the scoring column, where Sanders had more touchdowns working with the starting offense against the tougher defensive look. Doing more in the areas that matter most, specifically putting the ball in the end zone efficiently against the one's defense, while posting nearly identical accuracy numbers, is exactly the kind of day that should move the needle in a competition evaluation, even if it does not generate a dramatically lopsided headline. But before this becomes a one-sided ledger, credit belongs where it is earned, and Watson had real moments on day 11 that deserve honest acknowledgement. There was a completion to Cedric Tillman that was slightly underthrown, but still got the job done. And the reason that particular rep is worth mentioning is not because of the result, but because of the decision. Watson cut it loose rather than playing it safe. He took the shot and lived with the outcome rather than checking down to a lower risk option. In practice, that kind of decision-making matters. You have to be willing to make the aggressive throw and learn from the result. And that is what Watson did on that rep. Tillman making that play also says something real about the connection developing between those two. There was also a connection to rookie receiver Jalen Noel, working over the middle of the field that showed genuine chemistry, developing between Watson and a young receiver still finding his footing at this level. And a completion to Gage Larvadain worth mentioning as well. Another rep that contributed to an honest picture of what Watson brought to day 11, rather than just the areas where he came up short. This is gridiron ground, and this is exactly what we do. We do not cherry-pick the narrative that fits the conclusion we already reached. We run the whole tape and give you every piece of it. If that is the kind of analysis you want to be plugged into every single day of this competition, then subscribing right now is the move. Hit that button. We are here every single day breaking this down at the level it deserves. Dillon Gabriel had a modest day of his own, finishing around 56% on 8 attempts. That number does not tell a full story about Gabriel either, but it does reflect a day where he was not at his sharpest, and where the reps available to him were limited by the nature of the competition at the top of the depth chart. Gabriel is a player worth watching as this camp progresses, because his developmental arc has been one of the more interesting subplots, running underneath the main Sanders-Watson storyline. And Taylon Green deserves a mention too, because the lack of attention he is receiving in the daily breakdowns of this camp is a genuine gap in the coverage. Green is a rookie quarterback navigating a situation where the top 2 spots in the room are consuming almost all of the public conversation, and doing so without complaint and without the benefit of the practice reps or the attention that would help the audience actually evaluate him fairly. That is worth acknowledging even in a breakdown that has to prioritize the competition at the top. Now here is the bigger picture take on all of this that actually gets to the heart of what day 11 meant in the context of the full competition. The fact that Watson has been performing competitively, posting similar accuracy numbers, showing up with real moments of his own, is not a problem for the Sanders evaluation. It is actually the most important context for understanding what Sanders' strong days actually represent. If Watson had been struggling significantly, if the competition across from Sanders had been weak and unimpressive, then beating Watson on a given day would carry limited meaning. You are only as impressive as the competition you are beating, but Watson is not struggling significantly. He is a legitimate NFL starter with a long history in this league, who is competing genuinely for a starting job he clearly wants. And Sanders has been outpacing that competition across the majority of the days. This camp has produced meaningful film. That is the real significance of where this stands heading into the final stretch of August. Wednesday was the session that everybody had circled on the calendar coming out of day 11. The reason was straightforward, and the stakes attached to it were real. Sanders was expected to get his next extended run with the first-team offense in full pads, and full pads changes the evaluation in ways that no amount of strong no-contact sessions can fully substitute for. Here is why full pads matter specifically in the context of everything Sanders has been showing across this camp. The anticipation throws, the pre-snap adjustments, the ball placement decisions on plays like the conception rep, all of those things happen before or at the moment of ball release. The pads-on environment tests whether those same decisions happen with the same clarity and conviction when a defensive lineman is in the quarterback's face, and a linebacker is buzzing into the throwing lane, and the physical noise of contact is happening everywhere around the play. That is the question that day 11 did not fully answer, and that Wednesday was supposed to. A quarterback who processes at a high level in a clean environment, but loses that clarity when the physical chaos increases, is a different player than one who maintains the same processing level regardless of what the environment throws at him. Seeing which version of Sanders shows up in full pads is the legitimate next step in understanding what the ceiling of this competition actually is. The operational cleanliness across the entire offensive line is also something that needs real work before the preseason games begin. The pre-snap penalties that ended practice on day 11 were not a disaster, and they were not unique to one quarterback's unit. But they are a real issue that compounds in a preseason game environment where the officials are throwing flags in real time and where drives get killed by penalties that simply cannot happen when the games count. Getting that cleaned up before the preseason opener is a genuine priority that the coaching staff is clearly aware of based on the reported response to the penalty stretch that ended practice. There are also rumors and speculation worth addressing in the broader conversation around this competition, and it is important to frame these clearly as what they are, which is speculation rather than confirmed reporting. There has been conversation in Browns circles and in the wider NFL media about what the front office's actual preference is in this competition, independent of what the coaching staff says publicly. The suggestion in some quarters is that the organizational preference may not be perfectly aligned with what the day-by-day practice competition is actually producing, and that the framework being used to evaluate these two quarterbacks may have some built-in factors that are not fully visible from the outside. These are rumors. They are not confirmed. They are worth mentioning because they are circulating in serious football conversations, and because the questions they raise about the evaluation process are legitimate ones regardless of whether the specific rumors are accurate. Framing this competition as a completely clean merit-based evaluation, while simultaneously leaving enormous discretion in the hands of the coaching staff to weigh unspecified factors after the preseason games are done, is a structure that naturally generates questions about what those unspecified factors actually are. What is not speculation is what Sanders has actually produced on the field across this camp. The anticipation throws, the pre-snap processing, the ball placement decisions, the scoring efficiency against the starting defense, the consistency across multiple sessions rather than one-off flashes. Those things exist in the film, and they are being evaluated by people whose job it is to know what they are looking at. If Wednesday delivered more of what Day 11 showed, but with pads on and physicality elevated, the picture heading into the preseason opener would look significantly different than it did at the start of camp. And the picture heading into the preseason opener is the one that actually starts closing doors and opening others in a competition that has been building toward real consequences from the first snap of training camp. The public trackers will keep circulating. The debates about individual plays like the Boston end zone catch will keep running on social media. The coverage discrepancies around penalty attribution will keep being worth monitoring and calling out when they appear. But underneath all of that noise, a competition is being decided by what actually shows up on tape. And the tape from Day 11 added another chapter to a story that is clearly not over yet. Day 11 of Brown's training camp gave everybody watching a lot to process. Shedeur Sanders came back from 2 straight days away from the first team, stepped into the most favorable environment Watson has had all camp, and responded with one of his stronger showings of the entire preseason evaluation period. The Isaiah Bond anticipation throw, the pre-snap adjustment that even a known critic had to acknowledge, the conception ball placement decision, the scoring efficiency against the starting defense. These were not coincidences stacked on top of each other. They were a pattern continuing to build. At the same time, the full picture requires honesty about the rougher patches. The pre-snap penalties were real, even if they were distributed across both units in a way the coverage has not fully reflected. The pads-on evaluation remains the legitimate open question heading into the next session, and the public tracker debate around the Boston end zone play is a reminder that the simple numbers do not always capture the complicated reality of what is actually happening on that field. What this competition is ultimately deciding goes beyond who wins the starting job in Cleveland in September. It is a real-time test of whether a young quarterback with evident processing ability and an evident feel for the game at a high level can hold his ground against a veteran in an environment that has not always been structured to give him a neutral playing field. Every day he holds that ground is another data point that the evaluation cannot ignore. Wednesday was supposed to be the next real answer, full pads, first team reps, the next chapter in a story that is far from finished. Here on Gridiron Ground, we are going to be here for every single chapter. Drop in the comments whether you think the Boston catch was a touchdown or not. One word, in bounds or out. Let us see where the Gridiron Ground community lands on that one. And if you have been watching this breakdown and you are still not subscribed, this is the moment. We are locked in on this competition from every angle every day, and we are not skimming the surface on any of it. Gridiron Ground. Remember the name. We will see you in the next one.